Now, when women are earning 100,000, I think men should not respond and say, oh, they're now earning. Boy child has been forgotten. No, the idea is, oh, so affirmative action is working. What can we do more?
Business is hard. I always tell people, business is hard. And especially now, you can see with the economy, many businesses are struggling to survive. Can you imagine how much more complicated it is when you throw this thing called family into it? Very successful men who have made a lot of money but have left very dysfunctional homes, houses. It has come at a cost that one wonders whether it was worth it in the end.
Children who are boys take a bit of a harder hit when maybe the father is maybe overly successful, because then you're constantly compared and you're constantly trying to match up, because that's the example that has been shown. Welcome back to another edition of Manspective Africa, the show that you love, airing every Wednesday on KTN at 8 p.m. And of course, we are on YouTube, where we premiere every Thursday morning. And of course, today is yet another conversation with a fantastic guest. I've met him before once. I know he doesn't remember, but I'll remind him on set. And we're coming live from Kayana Create, a fantastic community of women entrepreneurs. This is a space where you can come and plug in and get all the support that you need. They are supporting over 250 women, and they've done they have over 10,000 footprints of change, of in terms of impact for the work that they do. And of course, they have a co-working space. You can come and join this space. And of course, you can come and have your events here. And if you're just a woman who's looking for, you're a female entrepreneur who's looking for other women who are doing the sort of work that you do, this is the place that you can come and plug in. Mr. Joe Okello, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
We met the very first time when I was at Capital FM, and you was the chair of CBM Kenya, and we had gotten into partnership to do some charity work with Sabatia Eye Hospital.
Yes.
And I was the journalist who was sent to go and cover the story in Sabatia.
Oh, okay.
Then with this gentleman called Limiri and
Eric, yes.
And another gentleman who's now doing a lot of work around fatherhood.
Yes, Mongera.
Mongera, yes, exactly. And I met you.
Okay.
And so yesterday when I saw that I'm interviewing you, it was such a pleasant surprise.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so perhaps our audience might not know who you are, or some already know, but it would be nice to hear from your mouth.
Okay, yeah. So my name is Joe Okello, and I'm the chairman of the association. I'm the chairman and the co-founder of the Association of Family Business Enterprises. Okay. It's an association that represents the interests of family businesses in Kenya. Okay. And we have plans to expand beyond Kenya to other countries in the continent.
All right.
Why we started the association is because family businesses are the backbone of the economy in Kenya. And in fact, they're the backbone of many economies globally. In Kenya, we estimate they contribute between 60 to 80% of the GDP.
Wow.
And about 40 to 50%, even if not higher, of the labor complement.
Really?
Yes. So family businesses are very important, but we see that they have certain challenges. And by bringing family businesses together, we hope to learn from each other and also get in resource partners to come in to help family businesses go beyond the current generation so they can be transferred to next generation.
Okay. It must be very interesting that you chose this sort of association to co-found it and of course to be its chairperson. What's your history with family business?
Okay, so I've been in family businesses for most of my adult and working life.
Yeah.
My parents started a school in the late 70s called Makini School.
Wow.
And it's a business that started in our home with 8 students or 8 pupils and grew over the years, and it was in the control of the family business, in the control of the family for 40 years. I worked in Makini for about 20 of those 40 years, so I have a lot of experience of working in family businesses. I have worked in businesses outside the family business. Yeah. And one of the businesses I worked for is a global multinational, which is also coincidentally a family business. Yeah. So I have a lot of...
What's this global organization or global business? The one that you're saying you've worked with, which happens to be family owned. You don't want to mention the
No.
name? Oh, that's fine.
It's,
Okay.
it's a company that I worked for for
All
quite a bit
right.
period of time.
All right.
Yes.
It's fine. Well, I was reading your story. I found a lady called Pat Okello
Yes.
who speaks very highly of you.
Oh, that's very fortunate of me.
Yeah, like in all her interviews. I don't know whether, are you aware that she speaks highly of you? And who's that to you?
Well, I am pleasantly surprised.
Okay.
Because she's my wife.
Oh, she's your wife?
Yes, so it helps.
Okay, and she's the one who runs this Kayana.
Kayana Create is her baby, and it's her passion. It's what she occupies her most of her time.
Let's start that conversation from there. Maybe you have dealt with so many entrepreneurs, especially female entrepreneurs.
Yes.
What would you say is the role of a supportive husband in the outcome of their business, or just their well-being generally, or lack thereof, and the impact of it?
Yeah. So I think that a supportive husband should affirm their partner in their endeavors, in whatever they select to do. Affirmation is very important, and also not to overstep one's boundaries. So I've been very careful to realize that this is what she does, and I will lend my support when necessary, when needed. Exactly. I think the success of anybody, even if the roles were reversed, for any partner, is to really support, because otherwise business or enterprise can be a very lonely journey. And if you don't get support at home, where you'd expect to receive it, then it's even more of a challenge expecting to receive it outside. So I think, it's just affirmation, support, and encouragement.
There's a story she says about how, she quit her job in Nairobi and to join you in Mombasa.
Yes.
And how, you having this experience in running, in being a part of a family business, coming from an entrepreneurial family, sort of like gave her the wings to fly and to believe in that, Maybe perhaps briefly, without really delving in her story, you can tell us from your perspective,
Yeah, so at the time of when I was getting married to Patricia, I lived in Mombasa. I was living and working in Mombasa, and she was based in Nairobi. So I even came from Mombasa to Nairobi, where we had our wedding. But on the advice of my father, he said that when you start a marriage, it's good for both for the couple to stay together. Because they don't really know each other. They may think they do, but until they live together, it's the early years of that marriage the success of the marriage can really depend on how the early years go. And I thought that was very sound advice. So she worked in Nairobi, and I worked and lived in Mombasa for about 3 months, whereafter she resigned from her job, which was a big ask, especially because she had a career that she saw had a lot of potential, and she was interested in it. And she came to live with me in Mombasa. And I told her that, well, we discussed and thought that maybe in Mombasa she should pick up and start a job or start doing something with the skills or interests that she has. And indeed she did. She started a company called Willard Production Limited. And she started it from the home on one computer that we bought through. Those days, computers were a lot of money. I think PCs were about 150 to 200,000 shillings. So we bought it through a SACCO loan, and the Willard Production Limited was born. And that was in the year 2001, possibly 2001. And it grew, from a solopreneur, if you like, a one-person business, to a company that has even spawned other companies. So I saw that even though she did not have an entrepreneurial background, she definitely had an entrepreneurial spirit, and she had the traits that would help her succeed. And I always tell her that I think she's an even better entrepreneur than I am.
I like that. And I was actually quite inspired by her story when I was listening to it. And I think we live in a world where now it's very difficult to find women who speak highly of their husbands. It's sort of like it's become like an outlier. Like what we've normalized is that, oh, you know, I was battered, this has happened, and there are many, many issues of gender-based violence. So to hear to hear a woman who really talks about a supportive husband, how you know you don't mind going to you know, for games with the kids and to, you know, to hold the home and to do all these things despite all your busy schedule. You've not relegated some of this responsibility to her. I think was a breath of fresh air. Where are you getting that from? That being supportive is something you saw at home?
Definitely, yes. Both my parents were both gainfully employed when they started Makini School. And then they then both ended up working in the school, although my father had a number of varied interests. And I saw him give a lot of support to my mother in her endeavors, because she worked for a bank, and then she got a job in a bank that was a continental role. So it was a job, it was quite a senior position, which made her move out of the country, although we were older. My siblings and I were in university or in, around then. And so she then, I saw my father lend a lot of support to her in her career. And I think that she would attribute at least some of her success to the fact that she got support from her husband.
From her husband. Yes. And when we were off camera, I asked you whether the name Okello means anything in your culture.
Yeah, and you even went ahead and told me what it means. So you go ahead and say it.
So in my culture, Okello means the one who comes after the twins.
Yeah.
You know.
I would like to investigate what my father was named for. I know my sister would know, and probably my brother. But I am hopeful to, considering capturing my father's father's life in the form of a memoir, and that's one of the things that I'm going to bring about. Find out who this man is and how he got named Okello. Yes.
Okay. So a memoir. Why a memoir, and why do you want to do it? What was the significance of this?
I think so that my father passed away 20 years ago. And he would have had he has 7 grandchildren, and I think because only 2 were born at the time of his demise, it would be good for them to know who he was in the form of a book, to be able to read about him and his life. He led a very interesting and full life, but he was a very understated and humble man. So I think it would be good for him, to be at least remembered through his, in the form of a book, by his family, friends, and anyone who's interested to know more about him. There's a large fraternity of people who've gone through the Makini School system, and I'm sure they would also want to have an interest about one of the founders of this institution that he started with my mother.
Yeah, my wife was a top student at your school. And she's very fond of Makini.
Good, so you chose well.
Yeah.
Or she chose. I don't know.
Hapa naona nikaa yeye alichagua. It's not bad. I think sometimes women also, choose and we think we're in charge, but really.
No. Yes.
Yeah, so but do you have any what memories do you have of your father?
Oh, I have many memories. He was a very hardworking man, very principled, and but he was also very full of life, and he was a very, very selfless person. So I, fond memories. We just commemorated 20 years, as I said, last month in November, and so I was fortunate to have a father like the one I had.
I want to get a bit more, because I think we're living in a world where this word daddy wounds and daddy issues has become such a mainstream language. It seems like everybody was wounded by their father. So to hear a story of, my father was just good, almost sounds like an outlier, I'm not saying that it's perfect, but
no, exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody is perfect.
Nobody is perfect.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And And of course, growing up, we had our own perceptions of our father, because my dad was, he was a very forward thinker, but he was also, he also had very traditional, or very, maybe not the word traditional. Some of his principles were,
conservative.
Yes, they were quite conservative. So he was typical of the dad of that generation, where I like to joke that we feared and loved.
In equal measure.
Or in some sort of proportion.
It was nice. I mean, and I think I think if we look at that, because I think also my dad might slightly younger,
but from the same generation.
But from the same generation, there was a colonial occupation in this country. There was World War I, where either our grandfathers went to fight in Burma or whatever. Then there's World War II. So there's a whole lot of history happening in their lives that eventually forms how their fathers. Have you ever thought about this and made sense of this?
Definitely. And we always look, when we look at how the generation, Gen Zs are, and my generation, which I think would be Gen X, and we see the difference in attitude, and you could argue that our generation is living some sort of trauma that was handed over to us by our parents' generation, which of course they got from this turmoil of colonialism and to independence, and for many of them being the first ones to fend for themselves and for their family.
And to pay taxes.
And being migrants into this city. Many of them were not born or raised in Nairobi. They're the ones who came to find a new life, as it were, in Nairobi.
My father was a police officer. Okay. And he went to Kiganjo, I think, just a few years post-independence. Yeah. And of course, he told me that the way they were taught is that discipline is first. Human beings are not naturally disciplined. That you first use force, then when they become disciplined, then you let them be. And you realize that this is the logic of many of our parents who grew up in that era. That discipline was not naturally acquired. That was something that had to be instilled through very severe forms sometimes. And it doesn't come from a bad place, because sometimes we look at them and we say like, wow, what a brutal dad. My mother was not available, I wasn't loved or hugged and stuff like that. How have you seen this changing parenting thing? And now that you're raising, I think you're raising Gen Zs in your house. How are you navigating this world?
So, one thing that I think with Gen Zs that is a bit different from us is that I don't think we are, the instilling of that, or putting in that discipline of fear factor into our children is as prominent. I mean, our children are much more responsive, and I think they are. I don't want to use the word aware, but
there's some level of awareness.
Yes. So there are a lot of things that I remember growing up that I don't think I would be able to get away with. They talk back sounds rude, but they have an answer, and they ask questions. I think our generation will kind of,
you don't ask questions.
Seen but not heard. But here we get a questioning why we do what we do, how we do things. So I think they are, and I think it's a good thing. I really do, because I think that it's always good to be able to question and to ask.
And I think also, of course, the way some of us were raised might not work in the world we're living in right now, where systems and structures have changed. There's a lot of liberal ideas, there's a lot of equality, there's a lot of justice, And sometimes I also feel like many men are struggling because we are stuck in that world that favored us. And so we don't know how to adjust to this reality that women have a voice and they're running the show. And right now, you've seen the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics have just released a statement. Let me just read it. I found it very interesting. Of course, this is a very nuanced thing, because when the media writes things, they sometimes write them from a lens of anyway, I'll look it out. I'll look it up. But it's like the new jobs, the new 100,000 earners.
The top.
The top are now mostly women. Over almost out of the 10,000 who get into the labor market and earn that sort of money, I think almost 80% of them are women.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's just been released by the Business Daily. What would you speak to a young man who perhaps was raised in a conservative family, but then is in the city and is dating a Strathmore or a USIU babe or a liberal woman who was raised, to fend for herself, and the traditional rules of, subjugation and power and all these things might not work in this home. How do you seed power? How do you manage a home in a modern world?
I think it's the attributes. I think one has to listen, one has to be accommodating, and to be tolerant. I think in this era that we're looking at, even if we look at companies and corporations, there's a lot of, I think the term I hear being bandied around is collaboration.
I like that.
It's about working together. And I think it's much more fulfilling and it's much smoother than if you get caught in a power struggle, which I see even happen in couples. You hear of this thing of the women earning more than men is, I'm sure, will cause disquiet in some of those
in some of
those homes. But to me, it should be a boon. It's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
That now women are getting what they deserve. They're getting paid well, and hopefully this is a trend that will continue.
And I like that. I like what you said, collaboration, because I think previously when we were hosting Manspective, we're only hosting men. Yeah. But at the core of my heart, really, I think that we cannot have men-only spaces and women-only spaces. Yeah. We might have them temporarily, maybe to deal with specific issues they're facing, like maybe gender or whatever, or business or specific niche. Yeah. But ultimately, we must find spaces where we both meet and talk to each other, not at each other, because I feel like there's already a lot of bile that's going on between these gender wars, that it's feeling like, okay, you can't just, we can't sit down and talk. And I feel like people who are struggling a bit more, and maybe I'm wrong, are men, because we grew up in an era where, for me, where I come from, I was called Woisiro. The man is the pillar. And then you come to the city and get a woman who went to Makini, top international universities, did fantastic. You can never out-earn her if we were to look at merit based on, or you find a woman who's absolutely brilliant and you love her. But now you can't come up with the idea of collaboration in the home, because the traditional software in you
can't reconcile
you can't reconcile that. I don't know, because I also see you do a lot of work with young people.
But I think a lot of it is mindset. I think we see a lot of chauvinism. I was fortunate that I grew up in a family with a mother who was I like to joke, an overachiever, somebody who did not see limits and broke a lot of glass ceilings. But she said that it came at a price, because whenever you're breaking these barriers, it takes its toll on one, and you always wonder, did I do enough? And the work is the work ever done? But if we're starting to see, as this report says, that women are amongst the top earners, it's a mindset that has to change, especially for men. That this is the way things are now, and they will continue to change. But I don't know, from how I look at the world, I don't know if we're seeing a new world order, because I still see a lot of men in very dominant positions. So I don't know if it's something that will be seeded overnight, this power thing. But as I said, my view is different. If we can collaborate, then
I like that.
It would be a different,
because when you mentioned there are 100,000 earners, because I think many of us don't understand why we need affirmative action. For me, affirmative action is to correct the historical wrongs. So there's a population that has been subjugated or has been denied its rightful place for over 50 years in this country. And because of that, we need systemic changes in education, health, all these things, to try and mitigate the gap. And when you mitigate the gap, now when women are earning 100,000, I think men should not respond and say, oh, they're now earning. Boy child has been forgotten. No, the idea is, so affirmative action is working. What can we do more? But still, remember the larger power dynamics. Men are still, it's still a patriarchal system. And still rest within, within that system.
And I don't think that's locally. I think that's
It's a global thing.
Yeah, I really do. That, yeah.
All right. Before we go on a break, I asked you whether you played basketball.
I did. I did play sport. I played sport in school. When I went to university, I also played sport.
Okay.
And I enjoy. Even today, I still in different sporting activities.
Okay.
Because of primarily because of my age. Now we do things that are age appropriate.
Oh my goodness! Age appropriate activities.
Well, I'm a realist in that when it comes to that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I do. I picked up. I go to. I like to go to the gym. I work out. I like walking.
Yeah.
I picked up this game called golf, but it's got its own complexities.
It's a rich man's game.
That's what my father mocked me when he was alive when I started playing golf.
Yeah.
And he told me, "Oh, son, now you're a rich man." I said, "Not by any standards, but let me try this game." But the good thing, it's becoming more and more accessible. I think, there's this golf course called Golf Park, which is a public park, and it has given many people an entry into a game and that's where I learned how to play the game. That was previously an exclusive game.
Of the business executives and the
with all
titans
all
of
the
industry.
stereotypes you want to lump in there.
Exactly.
But no, so that is changing. I'm seeing younger people playing the game. So it's a game I play on occasion. I would describe myself really as a recreational golfer.
Okay.
I've not taken the game too seriously.
I have a theory, and I don't know. I've noticed that men who were raised in very successful homes, either there's two outcomes. Either the outcome is that they completely crash, or they succeed wildly.
Yes.
Those who crash are barely able to make it even a quarter of what their fathers achieved. But those who make it widely successful. Is that something you've noticed?
I wouldn't be able to say that. Does that stand only for people from successful families, or would that be true for people from any family, that some become successful and others don't? I can't tell whether that can be attributed to the fact that the people came from successful families. But there's again, I go back to this term mindset. There's this story that is kind of folklore of this. I'm sure you might have heard it before. This father who is a chronic alcoholic, and he has two sons growing up, and then 30 years later they go and look at the two sons, and they find that one son is a complete alcoholic.
The other one is not.
Is widely successful. And so they go to the one who's an alcoholic and says, why did you turn out to be an alcoholic? And he says, it's because my father was an alcoholic. They go to the other son and said, how come you turned out to be so successful? And so it's because my father was an alcoholic. So the same answer, but one saw that
it's more or less
I'm predestined to become one because this is what I've seen. And somebody's like, because of what I have seen, I will do everything. I cannot be like that. So I can't really tell. But from another way to answer that question is that when I look at the association that we represent, the family businesses, we see a lot of, one of the big challenges of family businesses is business is hard. I always tell people business is hard, and especially now you can see with the economy, many businesses are struggling to survive. Can you imagine how much more complicated it is when you throw this thing called family into it? Because now the lines become very blurred. And so we always say that family businesses make it even more difficult. So what we see a lot with family businesses, the challenges we see is conflict. Because you've got this emotional attachment, especially in a family. You find that your brother is your brother, your sister is your sister, but they might also be your boss, or your peer, your colleague, or your direct. So you're dealing with another layer of complexity, and that can affect many things.
But the theory I have, and it's not based on facts or whatever, but just my own observation, that I think men, especially children who are boys, take a bit of a harder hit when maybe the father is overly successful, because then you're constantly compared and you're constantly trying to match up, because that's the example that has been shown. And so if you are not capable of reaching that height, then it completely crushes you. But if you can, then you really become wildly successful. I don't know whether that's something.
Then again, I'll ask this question: success is
relative. Oh.
Or what is it? Then? Yeah. Is it that they didn't make as much money as their parents made, or because we've got examples of very successful people or very successful men, for the purposes of what you've suggested, who have made a lot of money but have left very dysfunctional homes, houses. You know, it has come at a cost that one wonders whether it was worth it in the end. We've seen people being destroyed actually by success, or what we would consider to be success in our own terms. So I don't know, you know, if we look at it, we have to look at it really from a balanced perspective.
How do you define success?
I was hoping you didn't ask that. I guess, you know, traditionally we always look at wealth as one of their components, or you know, they say that at least somebody is stable financially. But I think it's other things. I think that success can also be looked at from how, for those of us who have children or a family, by the stability of that family and how things happen. But you know, I don't know. Success it's a word we like to use or to try to say we aspire to be or to emulate. But it's a tough one, isn't it?
Okay.
Success to me is kind of like this word happiness. You know?
Oh yeah. I liked it. I was watching a certain psychiatrist online who was talking about happiness, that happiness is really about perception.
It is.
That, you know, somebody says it's raining, or my day is ruined. Somebody is saying it's raining, my garden will be green.
That's true.
And oftentimes we don't want to own that happiness can be our own responsibility. We like to always apportion blame. You know, sometimes maybe my father wasn't there, maybe my mother left, maybe this happened. All those things happen, and we're not saying that they did not happen. But it's very difficult for many of us to take responsibility and say that I'm living the life which is a product of the decisions that I've made.
Yes.
Yeah. How have you learned about that? I mean, how's that been for you? Like this concept of responsibility, how do you see it? How do you perceive it? Because to sit on this board and to run all these things.
I think responsibility is something that we have to take up. You know, I think it's good to be responsible, but another factor is which goes hand in hand with responsibility for me is accountability.
Accountability.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing too. You know, that when the chips are down, you know, when you're responsible, you also have to be accountable. You have to be able to, you know, to tell those who are key stakeholders that, you know, this is what is happening and this is how we're going to deal with it. So I think that's also a key factor.
I think we often don't talk about accountability, especially in the era we're in. We like to. It's tough to be accountable.
It is.
But it's also, you can't be successful. I mean, you can't make it in life if you don't take accountability seriously. Is it possible really for you to ever make anything? I don't think so. But maybe in a country full of impunity like ours, you might. You might. And I think
you say the less accountable, the more successful one is.
Some people would say that.
It would appear that way.
It would appear that way, that, you know,
but ultimately we are all accountable. You know, whether we want to admit it or whether we like it or not. I think that's how accountability works.
I think so. We cannot live because our audience always loves money conversations, you know.
Okay.
But I think now for you, it would be nice to let us know, what have you noticed as what makes a successful family business? Because there's also a story that it's within the Indian community that they're able to transition from a small shop to a large retail store, and a supermarket and a hypermarket and stuff like that. But for Africans, it's alleged, and I don't know whether my data or whether my assumptions are correct, that we barely don't know how to hand over business from one generation to another. What have you learned to make a successful family business?
So they have been in business a lot longer than we have.
Oh.
Yeah, a lot of them started business. I mean, some of them, they're descendants of the very prominent Asian Kenyans here. Came, you know, to build the railway line and then started from very small micro businesses and grew them. So, one, they have the advantage of longevity. You know, a lot of African-owned businesses started post-independence. And in fact, many of them came from either civil service. Some of these businesses were started by people who already had some level of privilege, or education or something that could make them transition into business. So that's one difference. Secondly is also the setup of the family units. You know, a lot of the Asians are much more cohesive in terms of you know, they all live in one home, this joint family unit concept, so that you can find the brothers and sisters and cousins all living under one home. So they have had that opportunity to kind of get things, to have a better understanding and get things right in terms of the transition. And yes, it would appear that they have been able to move businesses across generations more successfully. We are still in that transition phase. I've got a good friend of mine who says, and he's very involved in, he's a lecturer in family business, he says, we are transitioning, right now we're seeing a large transition from first to second generation in African businesses, whereas there are many Asian businesses that are already in the third generation.
Yeah.
But he says his fear is, right to your point, is that maybe 80% of that, of the wealth in these businesses will be lost from transition from family, from first to second generation. Which would be very unfortunate. You can imagine losing 80% of that wealth because we didn't handle the transition. So, to your point, that is the reason why the Association of Family Business Enterprises exists.
Okay.
Not only to serve African businesses, but to serve all family businesses. Because although we're seeing Asian family businesses in the third generation, they too are facing maybe a different form of challenge than the African businesses.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness, you said a very profound thing which I want to just maybe expound a little bit more. It's alleged, and I'm using the word alleged because it's alleged that you see, like the Makinis, those are the outliers, but the very few, and I work very closely with the civil society space. Very few successful African business owners only do entrepreneurship. Has it always been like this? This is just something that is coming back to Kenya, or we are using entrepreneurship to sort of like, you know, bad mouth the legitimate business owner. So we say, those are corrupt. It's just access to politics, and then after that, then you can make money.
So I guess the question would be, what would we consider to be a successful business, or what are the fundamentals?
What are the fundamentals
of a successful business? And I think that there are certain things. I think definitely one of the things is it's governance, how a business is run, you know, the structures, systems, because those, it's assumed that a business, it would continue in perpetuity. It's supposed to continue forever. That's the presumption, right? And so if it's supposed to continue forever, we know we are mortal beings, that we are in transition. So we're assuming that most businesses should outlive us. And for it to outlive us, then we should put in structures that make it seamless, that when Joe leaves, whoever is the successor will take over and be able to progress the business. So I think how a business, the business structures, the governance, how it's run and how it does things is one of the key things in determining whether a business will be successful. And this is where we tend to fall down. I see it a lot in enterprise and also in family businesses, where you find somebody who is very entrepreneurial, has a good idea, converts it into something that starts making them money. And they grow the business to a phenomenal size in the context of this market. But the business, it's very hard to distinguish between that person and the business.
And the business.
Yeah, and then when the person transitions or the demise, or even in some cases becomes incapacitated. Because as I remember when we were talking earlier about age-appropriate sports. So some of the things I could do when I was 20, I definitely cannot do now, regardless of how much I think. And so what happens then, you find that the people who build the business are the same people who tend to ruin, because everything evolves around them. You know, and then, you know, that's where the tragedy is. But we've also seen cases where people have built the businesses, have put in systems in place where the business actually grow. We saw in the last 15 years a lot of venture capital money coming in, private equity, and a lot of family businesses were targeted because there are certain advantages that family businesses bring. And some of those stories have turned out to be okay, and some not so okay. So a lot of it really depends on, to me, how a business is structured and how it is run. And that is the key thing that everyone should be concentrating on when setting up a business.
Okay. So whenever we hear that this widely successful family business has collapsed, we always feel like, we said it. It's the foundations were bad. They, you know.
Or family businesses don't work.
Or they don't work, you know. How does that make you feel as somebody who is actually trying to promote, promoting, you know, family business?
We had, when the Association of Family Business, which was formed 10 years next year, I remember when we had our first family business conference. And the media were very interested. We got a lot of interest because it was almost considered a new, if not a novel thing. What is this thing about family business, and why are we having a conference? And it was very well attended. And I went to somebody from one of the media houses and said, I hope now that you'll be able to talk favorably, about family businesses, because we want the perspectives to change. And he was like, well, he said, but are they successful? He said, yes, we've got stories, the businesses might not be big, but we've got what businesses we consider to be very successful, and we would like to be featured. But the person told me, basically, that the story about journalism and stories is that if it bleeds, it leads. Unless it's a story that is about failure, and we're not really interested, And I found that to be somewhat unfortunate, because then if you keep perpetuating this stereotype, what then tends to happen is that for a lot of next generation, and this is already a problem, that many next generation members don't want to join the family businesses. So I would rather, and in many ways we're architects of our own destruction, because children are raised by the family businesses, then they're sent out to get a very good education, they get good jobs, and they say, what is my motivation or incentive to go back and work?
But at the beginning, as we come to an end of this conversation, I feel like maybe the next part of this conversation, because I really wanted to get to know you a bit more first. And now I've seen you're like a flower that has just opened up when you talk about this family business.
Yes.
I think it's something that you're very passionate about, and we will have this conversation about.
Absolutely.
So just give us the stats. You're saying that 80% of 60 to 80%
make up the economy.
Make up the economy of this country. And you say
about 80%.
About 80%.
The labor about 55%.
So we talk about family-owned business. We talk about the Dev Keys. We talk about the Makinis. We talk about.
We're talking about.
Naivas.
Remember, you're talking about the big family businesses.
Okay.
There's so many. Why don't we look at sectors? Let's start. Maybe that will make it a bit easier.
Okay.
If you look at the hospitality sector, most hotels, and get away from the big brand names, the Marriotts. How many Marriotts are there in Kenya? But how many hotels are there in Kenya? The hotels in every town. Almost all of those are family businesses. Let's look at supermarkets. Forget about Carrefour. Look at the rest of the supermarkets. How many supermarkets are there in the country? They're almost all family businesses. Let's look at schools. Private school education. It's almost exclusively run by family businesses. Even the healthcare. So, they're there, but we don't. Agriculture. They're there, but we don't call them family businesses. We only look at the huge ones and assume that these are the ones. No, the economy is actually built by those small businesses in the small towns. Those are the people who are.
Then you're right. I think when you say 80%, it now makes sense.
Now it
because
makes sense,
in my mind it was just the big steel manufacturers and the Bidcos and all these things, which is nice, and they're family owned, but also the backbone, like in our community, the local M-Pesa shop.
What do I need?
Exactly.
Exactly.
The people who are doing samaki business, people who are doing flower business, apart from the big international multinationals. And agriculture. All right. As we come to an end, I don't know whether you have any closing remarks.
Yes, I encourage men who are in a relationship or who are with their partners, their spouses. Please be the support to your spouse if she is pursuing something that is considered worthwhile to her. We don't. There's no need for antagonism. We should be pulling in the same direction. And I think the society is evolving. We've seen it. We've seen with the kind of things the Gen Z have done this year especially. So we must be responsive to that. I think we have to learn to listen more and, as you say, take accountability. Let's be accountable for what we do.
All right, Joe, I think it's been such a fantastic conversation talking to you.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed. Honestly, you see, I was very calm. You have very calm energy. I like that. And so I think this is going to be a very good show. And I like how you've helped me that success is not maybe about the numbers of views or how wild it goes, but this is a way we need to redefine how we define success. And I think that's for me, is the takeaway here. Until next time, my name is Dannish Odongo. You can follow our conversation on Manspective Africa. We have a YouTube channel, by the way. 70% of you are watching our shows and are not subscribing. Manze, if you subscribe, we can get you better, guests. And so subscribe, hit the subscribe button. And of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, please, we are on air every Wednesday at 8 p.m. And of course, KTN has just rebranded. They're doing a fantastic lineup of different content. It's news, it's entertainment, it's sports. The KTN we grew up knowing, by this, the oldest private TV station in this country, is back and with a bang. And of course, support them and watch our show online, watch our show on air, and of course, just ensure that you engage. And of course, we're coming live from Kayana Create, which is a fantastic space for female business owners and female MSME owners, people who are doing business, whether you're doing crafting, whether you're doing content, whether you're doing running a beauty product, whatever it is that you're doing, you can come and plug into this community, and of course you can work a co-working space, you can have a place that you can do your training, you can do your events, you can do your different stuff. And of course the founder, Pat Okello, was very gracious enough to allow us to come and shoot our show from here. Until next time, my name is Dannish Odongo. Adios, and may God bless you.